I'm Jim Kircher, and I've always been fascinated by things that have carried the words made in St. Louis, and by the factories, big and small, old and new, past and present. And our first story has a little bit of all of that, and we didn't have to go very far at all to find it.
I grew up in a family of storytellers. I thought that I knew people who had even died before I was born. I heard so many stories about them. In time, all of these come together, and then you step back and you see a picture. And in our case, there's a Fenian uprising, there's steerage to America, there's a slum in North St. Louis, a candy factory, and that's the story of us.
Nine producer Patrick Murphy has spent decades telling other people's stories. But since entering semi-retirement, he decided it was finally time to tell one of his own, in the family history titled Candymen. Released in October 2020, it tells the tale of two immigrant families brought together by love and held together by licorice.
It started with my great-grandfather. His family had a candy store in Dublin, and he grew up working in the candy store. This is the middle of the potato famine. And he got involved in the Fenian movement. And in 1867, there was a rebellion. He was in it, and he was going to be hanged if they caught him. So at 20 years old, he booked steerage to America, landed here with nothing except the ability to make candy. So he came to St. Louis, met a young woman in the Dunham Coconut Factory where they both had jobs, 17 years younger than he was, named Margaret Switzer. And they got married in 1881, and she had a brother named Fred Switzer. Now the Switzers were really poor. They grew up in Carey Patch, the Irish slum on the north side of St. Louis. And he spent his life as a kid selling candy on the riverfront and around Carey Patch. So my great-grandfather knew how to make candy, Switzer knew how to sell it.
And so began another immigrant realization of the American dream. This one spun from sugar and the determination to rise above desperate circumstances.
There was a lot of prejudice. My uncle Fred told me about stories of seeing Irish and Catholics need not apply. You know, they were in their own red-lined district in North St. Louis, Carey Patch. They couldn't live anywhere else, and they didn't want to live anywhere else.
Using the kitchen in their Carey Patch tenement apartment, Joseph Murphy began making the chocolates, creams, and other sweets he remembered from the shop in Dublin, and Fred Switzer began selling them. Just a few years later, they had a brick-and-mortar factory called Murphy and Switzer Candy Company. Long gone, it once sat where the Gateway Arch now stands. But this was just the beginning of the Switzer and Murphy family story. And though at times they did try their best to get away from each other, their fates remained intertwined through bankruptcy and success, betrayal and reconciliation, and above all, the making and selling of candy.
It's called Candymen, but the women in this story are actually probably the most interesting people. There's my great-grandmother, Margaret Switzer, who put up with this roaming Irishman who was always picking up his bags and going to another city or going back to Ireland, you know, very, very temperamental, creative. Well, all this is going on, you know, she lost a child. She kept things together, resolved to never be poor again. The sister of the founder, Fred Switzer, Mary Ellen Switzer, was a force of nature.
It was the mysterious Mary Ellen's wheeling and dealing skills and the money she had earned trading horses out west that not only saved the business from bankruptcy in the late 1890s, but also put it completely into her brother, Fred Switzer's hands. Murphy, one-time co-owner and product developer, wasn't included at all. Even after he was asked to return to the company, the sign from then on would only read Switzer's. And when St. Louisans today hear the name Switzer, they think licorice.
It actually only became a licorice factory, making exclusively licorice during World War II because of sugar shortages. Before that, they made licorice, but they made all kinds of other candies too. Something called the Buttermel, the Chocolate Soldier, wonderful things that actually had their roots back at that Irish candy store. I actually found newspaper ads for my family's candy factory, 1845, in Dublin newspapers.
And this was just one treasure that Patrick found during his research for the book. Many more he discovered in his own family's collection.
My great-grandfather, the guy who came over from Ireland, he had a hobby of photography. He used to make glass plates, and he took pictures, like this is in the 1890s, 1900, of his family and his employees. There are over 90 photos in this book, and a lot of them I'd never seen before. I was really lucky. My dad and his brother, back in 1967, did like a 5-hour interview with my Uncle Fred. I had all of that, every family story, all about the factory where he worked. In 1900, he was a 13-year-old kid throwing rocks at streetcars in the St. Louis streetcar strike. I mean, this guy is really a part of history. Thank you, Uncle Fred, because you really made this book possible.
And one day, all of those characters in his book, those people whom Patrick had grown up hearing so much about, came back to life.
Among my parents' things was a canister of film. As fast as I could get an old projector, I looped it up. It was like Christmas time of 1930. Everybody was in it. All of my relatives, my grandparents were in their 30s, and they were all kind of hamming it up, pointing at their car, pointing at their house, doing the kind of things that people do in home movies. And then there's this flash, and my great-grandfather, the old gent from Dublin, Ireland, is full frame, like kind of laughing, wondering, why are they doing this? That was a surprise to find that. That was a real gift.
Long after the Murphy name was gone from both the factory in Ireland and the one on the St. Louis Landing, Murphy men were still making candy.
So the Murphys and the Switzers worked at Switzer Candy Company for 3 generations. In 1972, my dad, the last of the candy men, was fired. And it was bought by Beatrice Foods, a corporation, which was trying to bring in its own way of doing things. My dad was doing it the old way of things. It was inevitable. In the course of doing the research, I actually contacted the fellow who at the time was a young executive who fired my dad. Interviewing this fellow was really interesting because, like, I stopped hating him. I realized that it was his job. It's something he had to do. But that was tough for my dad. So this family business in the 1960s is sold to a corporation, which sells it to another corporation, which sells it to a bigger corporation, and eventually they just kill it. There is no more Switzer's Licorice. And then 2006, this abandoned factory is hit by a storm, made all the newspapers, and bricks are strewn all over the Eads Bridge. And in 2007, they tear down this iconic building. End of the product, end of the factory, end of story. But not. After that, there's another chapter. And I'll let my cousin, Michael Switzer, tell that part.
This is one of our new flavors, and I thought you would really enjoy it. When you think about it, candy is really one of the first brand choices that we make, right? You go to the movie theater, you go to the store, and your parents give you $1 and say, go ahead and buy some candy. Now, they don't really care what you buy, but you care. It's a significant decision now, and it's all yours. And that sense of my candy brand and my relationship, my personal relationship with this brand, it stays with us.
As an advertiser, Michael Switzer knew that consumers were always on the lookout for brands that felt authentic. After years of people wistfully telling him how much they had loved Switzer's Licorice, Mike decided the time was right to put his family's name back on a national product that had created more than a century of joy. But it wasn't nostalgia that prompted Mike Switzer to bring back his family business. It was the product itself.
So the process is a little bit different. Most of the ingredients are exactly the same. But there were many times as I was doing this, and it could be in the middle of a trade show. It could be in some negotiations with somebody who's supplying sugar. And I realized, wow, this is what my grandfather went through. It's a passion and you live it, and it's difficult, it's hard. There are 1,000 ways you can fail every day. So to see him start the company and grow it into America's #1 licorice from those kind of roots, it's extremely powerful to me and very touching. My one regret my entire life is that I never met the man. He died before I was born. Boy, what I would give to be able to sit down now and trade stories with him.
So while Mike connected with the loved ones he had never met by reviving their business, Patrick did so by becoming the next in a long line of storytellers.
Writing this book brought me a lot closer to these people that I'd heard stories about. I really feel in some strange way that I really know them, that we have some kind of a relationship. And by telling stories, you do more than just relate things that happen. You actually can relive the past.